All right, we are going to start. It is 7 o'clock, and I am so excited for you to join me tonight. Hello, athletes. Thank you for joining me. I do realize that there are a couple teams who have contacted me ahead of time and said they had practice, so they are planning to watch as a team. I also know some of you might be watching as a team, so welcome and thank you for joining. This session is being recorded, so I did put all the information in the chat with a link to the PowerPoint slides and a link to the website. I have a YouTube channel that I'll post the recording on after. If you come late, if you need to leave early, please utilize that link. I will also post it again because sometimes if people come on late, I realize they can't see the chat above. So you'll have that information. I'll post that at the end. I'll also put it in the notes of the YouTube channel. So if you need a link or something there, you can access it there as well. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Cara Miller, and I am your campus dietitian. So I cover multiple universities across the state of Tennessee, Sodexo accounts, and I'm really excited to join you. I know I met many of you during your compliance meetings or your first orientation of the year. For those of you who I haven't met yet, or for those who I haven't been able to visit because of COVID and travel restrictions, this is good for now, and I'm just so thankful that you're here. So let's go ahead and get started. My name is Cara Miller, as I mentioned, and I am your campus dietitian. Feel free to reach out to me. My cell phone number is there, so you can contact me. It's my work cell, so feel free to text or call, whatever is easiest. And my email is also there. Of course, maybe you even joined through Instagram tonight. If you haven't yet, give me a follow on Instagram. That way you'll have all the up-to-date information. I do post the links there as well as some additional campus nutrition information that you might find helpful. How can I help you? I do these kind of talks. I just met with the coaches last week. It was really fun to talk with them and give them the same information. I'm meeting them on the first Wednesday of each month, but I will be meeting you all the first Tuesday of each month. So I'll go over that again at the end. But the first Tuesday of each month, 7 p.m. Central Time, 8 p.m. Eastern Time. We're going to cover a variety of topics for the fall semester, and I have a whole nother set for spring semester. But tonight, we're going to be talking about hydration. Hopefully you've joined me with a water bottle. Maybe you've come from practice. Make sure you're staying well hydrated even through the presentation. Next month, we're going to be talking about performance plates and what those should look like to get the best out of your performance. The following topic will be meal timing. So I realize some students have stomach upset. Some of you just don't know what to eat and when. So we're going to tackle that one the next month. And then in December, we're going to cover supplements. We'll go over some of the basics, but I want you all to know that I am a food first dietitian. I'm very much going to promote all of our food options first, always. So I kind of think about it as like a tier. We have this bottom tier that is food, 3 meals a day, 2 snacks. Then we can look at what those meals kind of consist of. Are you getting the right portions? Are you having the right meal timing? That falls into hydration, which we'll talk about tonight. Are you getting enough of that? The next one for sure is sleep. So I'm not going to talk about that a ton tonight, but I want you to know how important that is. So making sure that you are getting enough sleep. And then the tier above that would be supplements. That's where that falls in. But if you're having supplements as a means to try to achieve your nutritional goals without having those bottom tiers covered, it's kind of like putting a band-aid on a gushing wound. So you'll hear me say that again probably, but if you've got a gushing wound, you put a band-aid on it, it's going to kind of slow something, but it's not going to get to the root cause. So we really want to make sure that those bottom tiers 3 meals a day, a couple of snacks, good timing, good portions, lots of fruits and vegetables, whole grains, your lean proteins, and have a little fun too. Then also making sure that you've got your hydration covered and sleep, and then we can look at the supplements or additional options. So hopefully you find those topics interesting. We will cover those each month, and each of those will be recorded as well. I do have a few things in the chat for handouts. So if you're looking for information on hydration, something you can share with the team, feel free to look for that there. You can click on the link and print those out or share them electronically, whichever you prefer. So let's go ahead and get started. Um, what is our big statistic for tonight? Roughly 65% of athletes come to a competition or practice dehydrated. And I know you all know that because when I met with some of you already, you've said when I've asked you to guess, How much percentage do you think it is? You're guessing, you're doing a great job, but you know it's a lot. 60, 70, 80, 100% of athletes show up dehydrated. You know that, and yet it's still challenging. So that's why I wanted to make this a topic for tonight so that we can really get to the bottom of it, kind of talk through some options of how to improve your overall hydration. And realizing that if you show up to a competition or practice dehydrated, you're already behind. I know many of you are really concerned about getting the most out of practice so that you can become your best. You realize that if you practice really well, you're going to perform really well. And so we also have to practice our hydration. But if you're not well hydrated, you're not going to get the most out of your practice in general. So please, making sure you're focusing on your hydration to make the most of your practices so that you really can beat the competition. If your competitor comes in well hydrated and half of your team or 65% of your team is dehydrated, we can guess who's probably going to have the best game, right? And that's like skill levels and stuff aside. If you're dehydrated, we'll see here in the next slide how that can impede your performance. So as little as a 2% decrease in body weight can really cause alterations in your performance. The first one we're going to talk about is your aerobic endurance. So who's going to make it to the 90th minute of the soccer game? Who's going to make it through the fourth quarter of the football game? Who's going to make it through the third set plus a volleyball? We need to make sure that you have endurance. You want to make sure that you're lasting a long time for the performance. Another thing we can talk about is power and strength. So in order to kind of get off the block, in order to have that quick burst, that quick jump, that quick reaction time, you really need hydration. You need water in order to help you fuel so you can respond really quickly and use those energy stores properly so that you can react to your quickest ability with power and strength. The other one we can talk about is muscle cramping. Maybe you have cramping in the second half of the game. Sometimes people wonder, like, what the heck is this from? Did I not eat well enough? Did I not stretch well enough? Did I get cold during half? It actually could be because of hydration. So keep that in mind if you have any muscle cramping. And we'll talk about that a little bit. Hydration and sodium go quickly together. And often when we have low sodium levels, this can lead to some of that muscle cramping. So just kind of think about that if you're having cramping. It could even be something like stomach cramping. Usually we see it in the legs or something, but think about all different types of cramping and how that might impact your performance. And last but definitely not least, our brain is primarily made up of water. So you can see how if we have a decrease in our hydration, it could affect our mood, it could affect our alertness, it could affect our performance. So how quickly are you reacting to things? Are you feeling extra moody? Are you having trouble remembering plays that you would normally remember? Are you having trouble knowing where to go? You feeling a little bit foggy? Maybe you didn't get enough sleep, but it could also be because of hydration. So you can see that it affects multiple areas of your performance, and that it's super important that we take care of it so that you can perform at your best. One way to tell the time old trick is your pee test. I figured most of you would assume we talk about this tonight. But at the very bottom there is that really dark color. That's your apple juice color. If you get to that color, it really does mean you're probably dehydrated. Lemonade is the next level up. And then if it's transparent color, you actually might be a little bit overhydrated. So what we're looking for is that light lemonade. Of course, it's not necessarily the color that ends up in the toilet, but the color that comes out. And it is a good check to guess if you can do the first pee of the day. So a lot of times if we chug a bunch of water, then shortly after we'll pee clear or really light color. But what we want to see is what is it when you first wake up in the morning? That kind of shows your overall hydration status. And then you can also check it after a performance. So we can look at different things like our sweat rate. We can look at our pee color to kind of get an assessment of how much water are you losing? Are you staying well hydrated during your performance so that you can know if you've lost that 1 or 2 pounds even. If you're 100, 150 pounds, that percent weight loss that affects your performance is just 1 or 2 pounds. If you're one of our bigger guys, 3 or 4 pounds, but still that's not very much when you have these hot practices outside, or even in some of the gyms now, it's been really warm. Maybe you've got a lot of equipment that you're wearing. So that can definitely impede your performance if you're losing all that water and not staying properly hydrated. So how do you know how much you need? Again, we're not going to calculate sweat losses per se, but we'll start with the basics. So if you take your weight in pounds, divide that number by 2, That's roughly the amount of ounces of water you should be consuming each day. So I give the example here, 160-pound person, divide by 2 is roughly 80 ounces. Those like Gatorade bottles or those Powerade bottles you carry around, those are roughly 32 ounces. Most of you need 4 of those a day at a minimum. That's without sweat losses again. So your goal is going to be for 2 of those water bottles before lunch, 2 of those water bottles after lunch. And just remembering that those sweat losses, if you lose 1 pound, is 16 ounces of water. So you'll need to drink, an extra half a water bottle or whole one just to make up for that. So it can be very easy to lose water if you're not paying attention to it. So one of the rules you can use, like we mentioned, is to do 2 water bottles before lunch, 2 water bottles after lunch. But another thing you can do is just during your practice, I get questions like, Cara, like, should we be drinking when we're thirsty? Should we be drinking automatically? I honestly would err on the side of drink automatically, drink on a schedule. If you wait until you're thirsty, it actually might be too late. A lot of times we're focused on our sport or we're focused on other things and we don't stop to say, oh yeah, I think I might be a little bit thirsty. And then the other side of it is you may not get a break at that time when you are thirsty. So then when a timeout is called or the quarter ends or a half is there, you may actually not, you might be behind already because when you were thirsty, you were on the court or on the field and you didn't have time like, oh, coach, excuse me, I need to go get a drink of water. So making sure that you're staying properly hydrated. And then if you can drink on a schedule, that really does help. We have learned that if the better trained you are, the more attuned you are, that's great. But again, if you don't always get the breaks, drinking on a schedule can help. The other thing is if you drink on a schedule, aim for 3 or 4 big gulps. Instead of just like taking a cup, taking a few sips, throwing out, really aim for 3 giant gulps, as big as you can. That's going to get you a good 6 to 8 ounces in just one stop so that again you can stay up on those total ounces, so hopefully you don't have as much sweat loss. If you have a lot of sweat losses and you're not making up for that hydration during your play, it could take you a long time to get back to that proper hydration status, because we'll see that it takes electrolytes, it takes some carbohydrates, it takes some water to properly hydrate yourself. So again, 2 water bottles before lunch, 2 water bottles after lunch, and then look at those sweat losses. So if you can drink on a schedule, 3 big gulps, that's going to help you out a lot. And you may even challenge some of your teammates like, hey man, it's like 2 o'clock practice. Hey, did you already have your 2 water bottles this morning? Or maybe you've got a roommate and you're just about to go to bed. Hey, did you have 2 water bottles after lunch today? Just kind of ask each other around. Maybe you're in the locker room, ask around, hey, did you all get your 4 water bottles? Just to make sure that 64% of you don't show up to a practice or competition dehydrated because, again, you're not going to get the most out of your practice and you're definitely not going to perform at your best. So, water is a really key factor here. I mentioned electrolytes briefly in the form of sodium. Electrolytes are just these kind of like little minerals that help to move fluid in and out of our body. So it can be really helpful with our heart. Pumping our heart takes electrolytes, creating our fluid balances, making sure that our blood is correct and not low in volume. But it also does help hydrate our muscles. So if you're not properly hydrated, you might not have all that water in the muscle, which can actually slow down how quickly you can use that energy. So I do have a rule of 3 H's that can be handy. When do you need these electrolyte drinks? Because Cara, isn't water enough? Yeah, most of the time water is enough. However, there are certain times that you need electrolytes, and this doesn't mean that you should be like walking around campus, drinking body armor and Gatorade and whatever just because it tastes good. If you're coming into a performance and you know you're going to be in a hot, humid situation or a long duration activity, you may actually, as part of your pregame routine, may want to be adding in some of those electrolytes or a Powerade or something with your pregame meal. But a good rule of thumb, 3 H's for when you need electrolytes or those electrolyte drinks. One is heat and humidity. So we all know right now Tennessee is pretty hot. We're getting into fall here, but we do know that if it's hot and humid, you really do need more of those electrolytes to keep those balances up. The next one is going to be a hard workout. So, primarily looking at if it's an hour to an hour and a half practice, maybe it's your competition is at least an hour, hour and a half long, then you really do again need some of those electrolytes. And I just remind people again, you're going to practice how you perform, you're going to perform how you practice. So, keep that in mind if you have access to some of these electrolyte drinks and you're having an hour, hour and a half practice, and you know that you're going to have the same amount of time for a game. Practice it during practice. I realize not all of you have electrolyte drinks. You may not have Gatorade on the sidelines, but for games. But if you can practice with it, it helps your body tolerate it a little bit better as well. And then it's not a shock on game day when you drink Gatorade, you get a stomach ache or some cramping or something just because your body isn't used to it. So, again, if you can practice it a little bit, that can be really helpful. The other thing to consider for electrolytes added is high altitude. And I do realize not all of us are at a high altitude, but you may be doing some traveling at some point during the season, and often that involves a plane flight. If you are in an airplane for an hour, you roughly lose 3 to 10 ounces of water just by being in the airplane at that altitude for 1 hour. So you can see if you were in an airplane for 2 hours traveling cross country to a game, you could easily lose 20 ounces of water. And that's a lot of water. That, again, is like almost one of those Powerade or Gatorade bottles. So, making sure that you are staying properly hydrated. If you're not properly hydrated, or maybe after travel, you say, oh my gosh, coach, I feel like I got a headache. I kind of get stomach ache. Even some of that stomach ache and tiredness can be caused by dehydration. So, if it's hot and humid, make sure you have an electrolyte drink. If it's a hard workout, more than an hour, hour and a half, and if it's a high altitude. Now, I mentioned if you don't have these electrolyte drinks, you can provide some kind of option that is a water electrolyte combination. All of these sports drinks are formulated for a reason. The sports drinks have a certain concentration of all of these ingredients to really help them absorb properly. Remember, I mentioned the electrolytes help fluids pass in and out of cells, and the carbohydrates help to get it quickly to the muscle. The sodium is one of the biggest electrolyte losses when we're sweating. Maybe you have like the white rings around your shirt, or if you wear a baseball cap, you get like the white rings around your cap. You might be a really salty sweater. You actually may experience more cramping. That's because of the lack of sodium. And the other thing then is the water. So all of this stuff really works together for a perfect combination, making sure that you have the carbohydrates. I know some of you have been with me longer than others, and you know how often I talk about the choo-choo trains. So you've got these little muscle glycogens, it's like little choo-choo trains plugged together, little glucose molecules linked together called glycogen. You break it off and you use it for energy. And we'll talk about that more when we get into our performance plates for next session. But those carbohydrates are very important. If you have a halftime break, or maybe a break between sets in volleyball, making sure that you take time to have these sports drinks. I've had athletes say, well, Cara, isn't water good enough? Well, if it's hot and humid, if it's a long duration, or if it's a high altitude, you need those electrolyte drinks. Most of these competitions are longer than an hour and a half. So you probably are going to need some electrolyte drinks. Well, then, Cara, can't I just have like a Powerade Zero, or can I just have something like that? That really has zero stuff in it. So we've got the electrolytes there, but it doesn't have the carbohydrates. And like I mentioned, these were originally formulated to get everything to the muscle as quickly as possible. We need the hydration in our brain, we need the hydration in our muscles, we need the carbs in our muscles. If your competition is performing really well and you get a halftime break, and they're refueling with not just water and electrolytes, but also carbohydrates to fill up their choo-choo trains, you can bet that if you go into extra minutes, that the team that had the extra carbohydrates is going to push a little bit stronger, right? But you know what? They aren't going to if they haven't practiced that way, right? Because we said that if you're not properly hydrated, even during your practices, you may not get as much out. So you may not be as properly conditioned. It all really does go together. So those carbohydrates are there for a reason. The sodium is there for a reason. I mentioned that can cause our cramping. I know when I was a kid, I always thought it was potassium. I think like my dad had Charlie horses, and I was like, Dad, eat a banana. But it's not the potassium. It really is the sodium. So if you're having trouble with that, you may try some extra salty snacks too throughout the day. And then also that hydration. So they all really work together very well. I'm trying to think if I missed anything here. I don't think so. That sodium, chloride, potassium, magnesium, and calcium all work together. Those are the primary electrolytes that help us to stay properly hydrated. So again, we probably don't want to be cutting the solution. I've had that question as well. Like, well, should we just like have half Gatorade, half water? Does that work well? And actually, they were formulated at the proper concentration so that it absorbs quickly through the intestine at the proper concentration so that it can very quickly get to the muscles and be utilized, which is what we want because we want you to keep performing well. So if you can, try to have regular strength Gatorade. Of course, if you have stomach upset or something, come talk to me. We can also talk through that. And yes, I don't think it's the end of the world if you cut your Gatorade, but it may not be absorbing properly and you may not get the biggest benefit from it as if you were to just drink it as it was originally made. The other thing to think about again is you probably don't need anything but water unless it's a pregame meal and you're going to have this as a drink just to help with your carb and your electrolyte stores. You shouldn't be just walking around campus drinking tons of Gatorade. You don't need that, but you do need to properly hydrate during your performance. And then if you have had significant water losses or sweat losses during your practice, making sure that you're replenishing those. So using these electrolyte drinks then is a good opportunity to rehydrate. We have a lot of electrolyte foods. I told you that I was a food first dietitian, so of course we can do water. I also realize that different schools have different budgets. Maybe you don't have Gatorade on the sideline, and maybe coach says, "Yeah, we're probably not going to get it." So what could you do? You could easily have a big glass of water or bottle of water and have some salty carb snacks with it. Maybe it's pretzels, maybe it's goldfish, something like this on the side. That's going to provide some of those carbs, some of that sodium, and then you're taking in your water, which is amazing. All of those things work great. Pickles are here too. That's a great source of sodium, and some of those trail mixes, the salty mixes are great. Potassium is needed. It is lost in sweat, so it's good that we replace that. You, of course, have your fresh fruits and vegetables, lots of citrus fruits, and even your potatoes. Calcium can also be a wonderful additive. So if you're looking at, again, a pregame drink, maybe you don't just want a big bottle of water, maybe you want a big glass of milk. That would be perfect. It has your carbohydrates in there. There's some potassium too. And then you get that good calcium to help that electrolytes absorb quickly. A lot of our plant-based proteins you see here, there's got the soy and that has calcium is fortified there. Magnesium, your beans and legumes, as well as your nuts and seeds. These are all plant-based proteins. So as mentioned, we have to focus on a plate. If you're looking at your plate, we'll talk about this at the next talk, but a third of it to a half of it is going to be carbohydrates. The other big component is going to be your protein, and the other part of the component is going to be your color. So if you're looking at your plate, you should be able to say, where's my carbohydrate? Where's my protein? Where's my color? And the reason being is because what we just mentioned, the carbs are necessary to restore the glycogen stores to make sure our muscles are full and ready to perform. All of that color helps to decrease the inflammation. But what we've also seen is that it also adds these electrolytes that help with hydration. And a lot of those are very full of water as well. Many fruits and vegetables are just mostly made of water. So that can really help us stay hydrated. And then the protein component as well to rebuild our muscles when they've been broken so that you get the most out of your training sessions and your strength and conditioning coaches are seeing your maximum potential there. So I didn't mention as much, but you've got your dark leafy greens there that provide a lot of those electrolytes, hydration, and they have the anti-inflammatory properties, which can really help. One thing that I didn't mention a lot is that water can also decrease your inflammation too, because if we're thinking about it, our joints and our muscles are primarily made up of water. So if you think about friction, like you rub your hands together, you get that heat. That's friction, and you can feel the heat. What water does when we sweat is it helps to remove the heat from our body so that we can start to cool down efficiently. The same thing happens in our joints. When we're using our joints, like our knee, for example, there's that lubricant in there, which is primarily made up of water. If we're dehydrated, we don't get that as much lubricant in our knee, for example, and that can cause an injury just because you're putting the heat and the stress on and you don't have the fluid to help break that down. So again, it helps to cool you off. It helps you with your performance. It helps with your cognitive function. It also helps to prevent injury. So making sure that we're, again, staying super well hydrated. Have I convinced you yet? Um, how do we do this? I talked about a lot of great tips, but on a practical level, how can you stay hydrated? So again, lots of foods have a lot of hydration and electrolytes, but we might even just take a look at what beverages you're consuming. You don't just have to drink plain old water, right? You can, of course, absolutely. But other things we mentioned, milk, you've got your unsweet tea. I know we're in the South, but the sweet tea isn't always necessary. Okay. So if you want to have like a little lemonade with tea, that's okay. But like an herbal tea is wonderful. Sparkling waters are really popular. So if you've got the bubbly, the LaCroix, something like that. Soups are great, especially as the weather gets cooler. That might be more satisfying to you. It also has extra sodium. So that can be a great refuel if you've been out for a morning run or something. Sipping on soup broth might not be a bad choice to help warm you up, get you hydrated, and get that sodium back. Lemonade and smoothies are wonderful as well. So anytime you can get in the liquids, that will definitely help. But you may also want to try a new water bottle. Use a straw, use a new water bottle. If you cannot bury the water bottle at the bottom of your backpack, it'll be easier for you to remember to fill it up. So if you do have your calendar, I've always been encouraging athletes this fall, especially when we're so busy getting back into things, look at your schedule, highlight with yellow or green when you're going to have your meals, right? So you should have at least 3 swipes each day where you're going to have your meal times. But the other thing you can put on there is a blue line for your hydration. So right on your schedule, maybe there's a class that you know has this drinking fountain right outside, or maybe you know you've got a really long lab and you're not going to be able to fill up your water bottle. So write in when you're going to fill up your water bottle. Get a drink that you love. Get something. Water is great. If you need to bring something else with you, that's fine. But find a great water bottle. Do you like to drink with a straw? Do you like the screw top? Do you just want an open container? Maybe it is these Gatorade or Powerade bottles that you can kind of pop open. So find what works for you. Pick a new bottle if you need to. They're not that expensive and it will definitely help your performance. So stay up on that. And then don't forget to add the color. Color, again, each color has a different key nutrient. So if you don't love green lettuce, maybe try a green apple, right? Like we can try different colors, making sure you are eating a rainbow and getting in each of those key nutrients, each of those colors. Because again, the color reduces your inflammation so that you can recover more quickly and get the most out of your performance. It helps to add hydration, so it goes straight to your muscles so you can perform at your best. And it helps to add those electrolytes to keep you properly hydrated with the sodium, potassium, and all of our other vitamins and minerals. That's what I have for today. The next one we're going to talk about, as mentioned, is our performance plate. So it will be the first Tuesday of each month. This next one is October 5th. October 5th will be performance plates, same time, 7 Central, 8 Eastern. You can use the QR code or you can click the link in your email. I also post it on my social media. So if that's easy for you, whatever is easiest. I also have these like slides, like kind of like this one, the PowerPoint slide, and I have it in an 8.5 by 11. So if you want those, if you need those, please reach out. I know the invitations I sent to coaches to send on to you all had them attached, but if you have a locker room where you've got like a TV rolling screen, put that up there so everyone remembers to do it. Or maybe you've just got a locker room, you want to put some on the bathroom doors, right? Like 8.5 by 11 might be a good size for you. And just remember that these are also recorded. My YouTube channel is Cara Miller. So dietitian Cara Miller, you can find it, my YouTube channel. You have the recordings there. I already know one of the teams is going to be having a watch party. So I'm glad you'll be joining me even at a later time. You can listen in and get all the tips. So I hope this is very helpful for you. I am going to shrink down my screen so I can see any questions that have come through in the chat. And I am going to repost all of those links that I was mentioning. So if you have any questions, stay on, ask them in the chat. Otherwise, I do individual appointments as well. You can send me an email or give me a call or text, and we can set up an individual appointment. If you have a team that would like to do a team talk, or maybe you're listening to this session, you all have a bunch of questions. I love getting people together, take a pad of sticky notes, write down all your questions, and let's like rapid fire questions. So that is another great option. Someone just has to reach out to me and I'll put something on the calendar. So I thank you all for joining me tonight, and I'm going to hop off of this main screen to see if we have any questions. Here. Great. Does anyone have any questions? I'm going to stay on for a little while longer. If any of you want to ask any more questions, that's wonderful. Otherwise, thank you for joining me, and I hope to see you on October 5th at 7 p.m. For our talk on performance plates. Reach out anytime and have a wonderful evening.